Well, thank you so much, Karen, for inviting me and for having me. As I said, I invited my coworker, partner in crime, Shannon King, who is also here with me today. We both work in the Deep Canvas department with Down Home, North Carolina. And if you're not familiar with Down Home, we're a community organization that works. We try to be, we are multiracial. We work on issues that affect the working class folks and rural communities across North Carolina. In fact, we're one of the only organizations that really does go into the rural communities across North Carolina. We're currently in 10 counties where we have chapters, and we're member led, which means that in our chapters, the members decide in that county what they want to work on. So, for example, in out in Granville, in a predominantly Black neighborhood, there was a park that was central to the community about 40 years ago. Everybody gathered there, people fellowship there, kids played basketball, there was a playground, and the city had let the park go into disrepair. And for the last, I'd say 30 years, it has just been an overgrown mess. And the members of Down Home decided that they wanted that park back and to be central to that community, and were able to lobby and get over 100,000 from the city to put that park back together. And that has already started with new basketball courts and new playground equipment, and they're mowing the lawn again and really taking care of that park. And that's just one of the things that our counties do. In Cabarrus County, out the other direction, we were able to get over 100,000 for rental assistance last year because the rents are so high, people are being displaced and they're houseless. And so they were able to get a commitment from the county year over year, 100,000, and to increase each year for folks that need rental assistance. So those are the types of things that we do. Our Me, myself, I have been with Down Home for 4 years now. The In the Deep Canvas department, started in 2020 with the effort to defeat Trump, and stayed with Down Home. It's my family, it's my political home. I love it there, and I love being able to share what I do with the rest of you. So I'm going to share a presentation that we use. I've kind of altered it some. We use this with our volunteers to teach them a little bit about deep canvassing. It's kind of an overview, and there's 3 videos in this that I want to share with you that we did to kind of illustrate what deep canvassing is. So let me just share this with you, share my screen. Okay. Let's see if, can everybody see the Down Home presentation on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm in the right place then. Because I am challenged as well, Karen. So I will do my best. Oops, hit the wrong thing. Done. Okay, slideshow. All righty. So again, we are Down Home, North Carolina. We work with People's Action, which is a larger national organization. We're one of their member orgs, and the New Conversation Initiative. So I do want to give them some credit for some of the work we do. This is a video that just talks about what we're up against here in North Carolina when it comes to Mark Robinson. So I'm going to share this, but before I do, I have to make sure that I share my sound. Let's see. Sound. Okay. All right. But if you cannot hear it, please let me know. And again, this is a presentation that I share with volunteers because sometimes folks come in and they haven't heard of Mark Robinson. I'm not sure how, but they're not familiar with him. So we want to get them really familiar with him so that they can join our cause.
I've lived in North Carolina for almost 20 years. I love the people here. I love the communities, that it's so easy to build, you know, wherever you go.
Nací en Honduras, pero he vivido 18 años en Carolina del Norte y mi hogar es aquí en Durham.
I'm a native North Carolinian, born and bred.
I've always believed in my responsibility to leave the world better than I found it.
As a believer of the Christian faith, I try daily to be more like Christ.
The values that I live by are kindness and inclusion.
What do I think about Mark Robinson?
God has not ever, not now, and never will ordain homosexuality. Get mad at me if you want to, but you can take it up with him.
I don't think we should tolerate someone who uses religion as a way to vilify or demonize other people just because of who they are and what they believe.
Nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes.
We're standing on shoulders, and he's reaching down his leg to kick our ancestors in the ass, as opposed to help lifting us up so that we can make a difference today.
Once you make a baby, it's not your body anymore. It's y'all's body. And yes, that includes the daddy.
Nobody owns my body, and certainly not Mark Robinson.
Mark Robinson is too toxic for North Carolina, too closed-minded,
Too extreme.
It's too reckless.
Too fake.
Es demasiado peligroso.
Mark Robinson is too divisive for our state.
So that is just one video we share with folks so that they're completely comfortable with who Mark Robinson is. We are actually conducting phone banks right now, and this is part of that presentation, but we're also on doors. Our goal is to knock 500,000 doors this year, to talk about Mark Robinson, and to fight against his extremism. We are also hoping to make over 200,000 calls this year. So on the doors, we're using a very, what some might say, controversial script, but we're talking about abortion because we found that here in North Carolina, most independents do not agree with a full abortion ban, which is what Mark Robinson is trying to institute. On the phones, we're talking about other issues, because with volunteers, we don't know that it would be, it's prudent to necessarily hone in on just abortion, because one of the things you'll learn when we get into a little bit more about the deep canvassing is we have to be able to share our own stories and our own experiences. And we didn't think that that was best for volunteers. So on the phones, we're talking about abortion, yes, but we're also talking about healthcare, and we're talking about making ends meet. Let me give you a little preview of what, come on. Oops, pause. Okay, here it is.
Hi, my name is Ella
Start
Barrett.
this over, and hopefully you can hear this. This is the presentation that we put together to discuss what deep canvassing is. And so if we had to use a standalone video, this is what we would share with people if we talked about nothing else, just to talk about what deep canvassing is.
My name's Bonnie Dobson. I am a deep canvas manager. I started deep canvassing in May of 2020, the height of George Floyd's murder. I was really tired of not feeling like I could make a change and writing people off without giving them a chance to understand. And I think that's what we do a lot in this country. They're over in that camp or this camp. We can't do that. Hi, my name is Bonnie, and I'm with a group called Down Home North Carolina. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about race and equity education in our school?
Well, I guess I'm sort of a 5. I don't know. It's a very complex issue. I grew up in a family that was kind towards Black people, but they, of course, knew their place. I mean, like you didn't socialize with them, but you were kind to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not always easy organizing in North Carolina. Once you start deep canvassing, I don't think it really gets out of your blood. I think you just continue honing that skill, really listening to folks, sharing vulnerably, being human. I'm African American. Both my sister and I experienced a tremendous amount of racism. If they had taught what African Americans went through when they were brought to this country, how they were enslaved, it might have given my fellow students a little bit more compassion. What do you remember about the history that you were taught?
I lived a very sheltered life. When you're being taught things that aren't whole, you draw conclusions that aren't real. I learned this when I started traveling a lot and my mind started broadening.
Hi, my name is Ella Barrett. I was part of the team of organizers that originally created deep canvassing in the LGBT movement way back in 2008. So deep canvassing is different from traditional canvassing in a few different ways. We've found that if we go to a door and just give them facts and tell them how they should feel, it really does not work. In deep canvassing, what we use is our own personal stories and experiences. By having this non-judgmental conversation and space to actually process and communicate with one another, it really deeply impacts both parties.
As organizers, we know that in order for us to win material things for our people, we're gonna have to change hearts and minds to build sustainability, to build community. And in this moment where so many differences separate us, Deep Canvas calls us to do better, to be curious, to learn.
For those that are nervous about deep canvassing, I would say I'm right there with you. I still get nervous every single time I go out and canvass. I would also say, I promise you that you will walk away from the training, you will walk away from your first deep canvas shift with more hope in humanity.
The most significant change has been me. I don't write anybody off anymore because I can't afford to. I have to do this for my girls, my grandkids. I mentioned it to my father, he's 91. He lived through Jim Crow. When I asked him, was he ever ready to give up? He said, hell no, Bonnie, hell no. He said, we just keep fighting. And you take those small wins and you build on them. Because we're on the right side of this and we can't give up.
Hi, my name is Ella Barrett.
Okay. I have to stop it that way each and every time. That I see that video and I'll tell you, it makes me cry each and every time. and I'm doing that. Just to explain a little bit more about how I started this journey. It was in May of 2020 and George Floyd had just been murdered. And on Facebook, I was a Facebook user. On Facebook, my friends, my community, I'm a transplant. I moved here 14 years ago from Texas. So my community was really my kids' friends' parents, right? We met through soccer or we met through school, but that was my community. Those are the people that I valued, I trusted. They were my friends. And what I was noticing on Facebook was some very derogatory, hateful messages about George Floyd and the murder. And I became completely disheartened to the point where I just stopped using Facebook. Stopped really relating to people. And that's about the time when deep canvassing kind of came into my life. And I realized that writing people off is not the best way to approach situations. That trying to help people understand my situation, how I was feeling in the wake of George Floyd's murder, how racism affects me, and relaying that to them, help them understand what I was feeling in that moment. And we were able to kind of bridge that gap. So I don't just use it for political reasons. I don't just use it out in the field. I use it in my own life as well. And I hope you find, as we go through this training, that you'll be able to do that too. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we're going to discuss. First, I want to kind of go through the difference between canvassing versus deep canvassing. And you saw a little of that in the video. Ella talked a little bit about how deep canvassing is different, but I kind of want to drive that point home. And then I want to share with you how we apply it in the field. And then I'm going to share a short video with you of somebody actually being deep canvassed at the door. So in regular canvassing, when you go out, and I've done this before, I don't know how many of you have done this. When I first moved here in 2012, I started knocking doors for Obama. And I had a short script, and basically my whole goal was to ID a candidate and pass out the literature. That was the extent of the canvassing. Basically, that's very quick. It's impersonal and it's transactional. You really never get to have a real conversation with that voter. Really, you're only doing this to identify candidate support. With deep canvassing requires us to be relational. It's either issue-based or candidate-based, and you're really sharing stories and talking to folks. It can be extremely transformational because we're sharing our experiences through our stories, and we're also asking a lot of questions to pull that experience out of the voter as well. The whole goal of deep canvassing is actually to change a behavior or to persuade someone to think differently. Not only are we, when we talk and share stories, what we end up doing is helping that person see something a little different, see a situation a little different, see an issue a little different, and they end up really persuading themselves in most cases. The whole process is 12 years in development. Ella, in that video, talked about her being one of the first people to develop this methodology. And she worked for the LGBTQ lab out in California. And after, I think it was 25 straight losses at the ballot box, they were trying to get same-sex marriage. They lost 25 times, even though they organized and knocked doors and made phone calls and, just really went out there and did some old-fashioned organizing, hundreds of volunteers and canvassers. They still lost. So in 2008, when they lost, they really thought they had it in the bag. When they lost in 2008, they decided, you know what, we've got to figure out what we're doing wrong here. So they went back out and knocked on doors, but this time they knocked on the doors of the folks that they had identified that either voted no or hadn't voted at all. And they threw away that traditional script and just started asking why. Why are you not in support? What is holding you back from supporting? Do you know anybody that is in a same-sex relationship? How are you related to them? What does that, what comes up for you? And for us, this is what this means. This means we can protect each other, we can love each other. So they went out asking questions and then sharing their own stories. And they found that it worked, that it actually worked, that it was one of the only proven tactics to change folks' minds in a lasting way. In 2020, when we did it with they did it with issues. Up until 2020, they had only done this deep canvassing methodology with issues. In 2020, we did it with the Trump-Biden election, and we found that it was 120 times more effective than regular canvassing. We had a study done by Berkeley and another institution, and they followed us throughout the experiment, and that's what they found. So here's what we do during a deep canvas conversation. We're sharing stories. We go to a door, we have really detailed script that we use. And we're asking first a scale question to judge where that person is. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is this and 10 is this, where would you put yourself? We don't ask yes, no questions because that kind of boxes folks in. But with a scale question, we can really figure out some nuances. If there are a 2 or a 3, there's a little wiggle room there. If 2, 3 in support, or 5, 6, 7 against, there's a conversation that we can have. And so we start to uncover what their biases are by just asking questions, those 5 W's. And we approach it non-judgmentally. I don't know if you noticed in my video where the woman said that she, they really didn't have a good relationship with Blacks. They knew their place, she said. It's my job as a canvasser not to react. What I need to do is figure out, where does that come from? And why does that person feel that way? So that I can uncover and unearth that and then share back what my experience is. I'm drawing on that compassion. And I'm listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond to folks when I'm deep canvassing. One of the other skills that we use in deep canvassing is kind of just sitting in that silence, just throwing a question out there. Why do you feel that way? And just waiting for that other person to fill that silence. But most of all, we're building a rapport and trust throughout the conversation so that by the almost to the end of the conversation, we're able to impart what we call the make the case. That make the case is where we stand on that particular issue and why. So we may say something like, whether we're Black, white, or brown, we all believe people deserve a roof over their heads, food on the table. We're making the case of what we believe and what we know to be true. In our abortion script, we say something along the lines of, regardless of our race or our zip code, we believe that everybody deserves the freedom to decide when and how and if they want to start a family. We're able to kind of sum up how we feel. And that person, because we've built rapport, because we've listened to them non-judgmentally, because we've established this relationship on the phone or at the door, they're able to hear that. And then we will ask them the scale again. And right now we're having a lot of success with our abortion script. Typically they'll move. And then we can move them on Mark Robinson as well. Any questions so far?
What are the 5 W?
5 W's are what, when, where, why, and what, when, where, why. I'm missing one. I always miss one. What, when, where, why.
Who?
Who? Thank you.
That was from Shannon.
Oh, thank you. Shannon always saves me on that. Yes, who? And my favorite is why, though. Just asking why really elicits a lot of good conversation. Well, why do you feel that way? Why is that right for you? Why do you, whatever it is. But when a person, and I think I'm going to get to this, let me see. Yes. So here's how we dig out those stories. We use something that we call a cone of curiosity. So as we're talking to a voter, if we hear the hint of a story, it could be something like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to vote because I was in the hospital over the last week. That's a story there. Really? Tell me more. Why were you in the hospital? Are you okay? Did you get the care that you needed? Is anybody there to take care of you now? What's that like for you? How did that feel? Why did it feel that way? Because regardless of the story, if we can help them understand that people care for each other, we need each other, we need all of our, to care for one another, that it's only right that we get the care that we need. We're building in that that basis, that philosophy that we are here to take care of one another. And you can always tie that into, but the government shouldn't be deciding how that is done. And that ties into same-sex marriage, that ties into whether we have whether we want to start our families or not. All of the stories that we can pull out of people, we can tie back to some of the policies that are happening in our country right now. In the abortion script, we're asking folks, do you know someone or have you ever had an abortion? 1 in 4 women have had an abortion, and they can relay that abortion story, and then we'll share our abortion story. For me, this is how it was. And, I don't believe the government has a right to tell me what I can do with my body. And that's what Mark Robinson is trying to do right now. And then we tie it back to the policies of Stein, and whereas he's not doing that. And we can get them to move away from Mark Robinson towards Stein when we pull out their experiences. Just telling them, you know what, we need to be able to decide for ourselves. No, the government should not decide for us, and we should not ban abortion, without giving them some sort of, without attaching an experience to it, without attaching a feeling to it, without pulling that out of them. It's just kind of sits there on the surface. But if we can dig a little bit deeper and pull all of that out, they remember, yeah, I remember what it was like. And yes, it was the right decision for me at that time. And no, I don't want to go back to the way it was. And they're able to then connect that to somebody, to somebody that doesn't want to ban access to abortion. And they're able to be more in support of Stein. And that's what we're finding. I want to share the research with you. I talked a little bit about it, but what the research tells us, and I think we all know this intuitively, is that facts and talking points, when we're out there talking to voters, that doesn't work. I know for me, in talking with Trump supporters, if I mention certain facts, he said this, and he was on stage and he said this, or he did this, or they can come up with alternate facts. Or they'll say to me something along the lines of, he didn't really mean it. He always just says stuff like that. They will make an excuse. And it has no persuasive impact on that voter. But if I share a story, and again, sticking with the abortion, I typically tell a story about my aunt, who I never met, who in the 40s had a back alley abortion. My dad was 9 years old at the time. It was his oldest sister who went off to college and came back pregnant. And they were a family that was dirt poor. They had 15 kids in a 2-bedroom house with outdoor plumbing. So it was a miracle they were able to send her to college. When she came back pregnant, my grandmother was horrified. So she took her to a midwife. They performed an abortion. She got an infection and died within 2 months. When I'm able to share that story with a voter, it makes them really think about what we might have to go back to. And then if I'm able to say, has something similar ever happened to you or someone in your family? Or can you think of a reason a person might need an abortion? If I'm able to pull that out and help them think about that and process that, typically they're on our side then. Sharing my story, surfacing the voter story, we have lasting persuasion. We're able to move people. And that's what deep canvassing is all about. I want to show you this video, and I talked a little bit about it This was back in 2008, that experiment, when they went back out because they had lost at the ballot box on same-sex marriage so many times, and they started to have different conversations at the door. And this is one of those conversations. This is between Jackson, who is on the left in the white shirt, the canvasser, and Clint, who is in the dark shirt. And what I want you to notice is Jackson just keeps asking questions to kind of pull a story out of Clint. And that story helps Clint process things differently and then ultimately change his mind. So here we go.
We're talking to folks about marriage for gay and lesbian couples. Do you remember that being on the ballot in 2008? Okay.
Prop 8.
Yeah, and do you remember how you voted on it?
We didn't vote.
You didn't vote. Okay. What would you say like is on the side for you that's holding you back from supporting it? You know, I'm just trying to understand better.
Basically, I kind of didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to make the wrong choice.
Yeah, sure. You want to do the right thing.
Now you're making me think about this. I happen to have a cousin who's lesbian that I love very much. Mm-hmm. And she's been with another woman for like about 20 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
So I don't have any prejudice towards that.
What's your cousin's name?
Her name is Jill.
Jill. Okay. And so it seems like Jill would be real happy, right? If she could get married.
They'd like to, especially they're going through financial troubles.
Yeah, it's helpful.
And I believe that stuff, see, I get emotional about this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, it seems like it's really hard decision.
Well, when it comes to health issues and stuff.
What? Just curious. Why does it, make you feel so emotional?
Because right now we can't do things for each other.
Yeah. That's gotta be really hard. And I see how much you love and care for them. And for a lot of folks, it's about protecting this sort of idea of man, woman, and things like that. But for us, it's about protecting each other.
Yeah, you taught me tonight when you were bringing that stuff up, and I realized that about my cousins, as much as I love them and stuff. I don't know that I take it in internally as much.
Yeah.
That's like you're saying about voting. Why didn't I? And now, because it wasn't something that was really super personal to me.
Sure. We're going to be voting on this again in the future. What do you think would be the right thing to do?
I would vote for gays to be able to legally get married.
And why? Why does that feel right to you?
Because I think if two people love each other, they love each other, as a couple, and I respect that.
Yeah, so that was, again, back in 2008, and that was one of the first ever recorded deep canvas conversations. And as you can see, Jackson asked, what's your cousin's name? Trying to make it more personal to Clint, pulling out those details, that story, and then sharing that, for some folks, it's, protecting men and women. And for us, it's about protecting each other, bringing that back home and helping him realize that's really all it was about. And then Clint was able to change his mind. It really is up to us to be extremely curious with voters and try to uncover their internal biases or their cognitive dissonance when it comes to an issue. But they don't automatically do that. We have to be curious. We have to be compassionate. We have to be non-judgmental. We have to really, really listen. I can relate to you so many different instances where I have been on the phone with folks and really developed a really strong connection with them by just listening. And I find that they're more apt to share things with me, a stranger, because I ask the questions that their family has never asked or their friends have never asked. and they're more than happy to share. Not long ago, I talked to a woman about, we were talking about this new Parents' Bill of Rights. I'm sure that you've all are aware of it. Disgusting bill. And I was just asking, just questions about what do you think about it? And what does it affect you? And no, it doesn't affect me. Doesn't, I have nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I finally asked, do you think that folks are making a choice to be, you know, part of the LGBT community, gay, lesbian? Do you think that's a choice? And yes, I think it's a choice. They're absolutely making a choice. And I said, wow, okay. I thank you for sharing that. We went on in the conversation, just talking about different things, just me asking questions. And then finally, the person on the other end said, well, I actually have been in relationships with men and women. I said, oh, okay. And she said, actually, when I was in 7th grade, I had a crush on a girl. And I said, you did? What was that like for you? How did that feel? And she said, you know what? I don't know that it is a choice. Right there was a revelation for her, because she didn't realize that this was actually the first crush she had, and she didn't have any control over it. She just was attracted to this other young woman. And so the conversation changed, and all of a sudden she said, I've never told anybody that before. I can't believe you're getting all this stuff out of me. I said, I'm just asking questions. I just want to know how you feel. That's all. We typically go into these conversations not intentionally discussing politics. We will discuss an issue that relates to a political candidate. But people are more readily apt to discuss an issue that relates to them. An issue of housing, an issue of making ends meet, an issue of healthcare. All of those kind of things that keep you up at night. We'll even ask, what kind of issues are keeping you up at night? We can always tie that issue back to a candidate who's on the right side of things, right? But if we start out with candidates, when we're talking, people are automatic, politics. And they throw their hands up, or they cross their arms, and they're not as open to discuss different topics with us. One last story. I was talking to, because we're all about stories. That's the way we convey things. And all of us have a ton of stories in us. Every experience that we've had is a story. And the thing that I want to kind of hammer home is that we vote and we act and we do things based on our experience with things. One of the things that one of my colleagues said is, have you ever been to a restaurant and had a really horrible meal, or you got home and it made, you were sick? Well, it was, you're going to automatically have a distaste for that restaurant. That's your experience. You're not apt to go back to that restaurant. You made that decision on how it made you feel. And that's what people do. We make decisions on how things make us feel. And how we experience things. So this one gentleman I was talking to self-identified as Hispanic, and went on to say, we were talking about the economy. And at that time, we were getting stimulus checks and there was extra unemployment. And he was not happy about that. He felt like that Blacks were taking all of that money, and that they were basically lazy and good for nothing. And they, just, all they wanted to do was collect welfare and get handouts. Well, I'm on the phone, and my race isn't necessarily, first and foremost in his mind. I'm just chatting on the phone, so he doesn't know. And so I listened and continued to ask questions. Well, why do you think that? Where did that come from? And he talked about growing up, and where he grew up, it was nothing but blacks, and this is what he saw, and blah, blah, blah. And so I let him get all of that junk out, all of that stuff he heard from Fox News, all of his crap out. And then I just quietly said, I'm Black, and that's just not been my experience. I've worked since I was 15 years old. There were 6 of us kids. We had to work. And then I went on to tell him about my experiences. And then I said, feel like what you're saying to me sounds like somebody else saying it, like pitting us against each other. Hispanics and blacks, you're coming over the border to take our jobs. I've heard that a million times, but I don't believe it. But if the people in power can keep putting these falsehoods out and make us believe it, then we can't come together and organize and build power for ourselves because we're busy fighting each other. And he thought about that for a minute. And he said, I think you're right. I never really thought of it that way. And that's the revelation that we're trying to get folks to when we deep canvas. I never thought of it that way before. This is new information, and I didn't think about it like that. That's what we're trying to do when we deep canvas somebody. We're trying to ask enough questions so that they, on their own terms, come to a new realization. They persuade themselves by just us asking questions and sharing stories. And that's why I love it so much. You can use it, with your uncle at Thanksgiving who doesn't believe like you do. I have a brother-in-law who voted for Trump. I can't explain it, but I've sat down with him and quietly chatted with him about, why I can't and why I don't support him. And this is why because this is how it affects me personally. And he's able to listen to that. I haven't been able to change his mind, but he is able to listen to me in a respectful way because I've treated him with respect in return. And that's what deep canvassing is also. So, any questions?